Hey, welcome in to the House of L podcast. I'm Laurence. Thanks so much for hanging out. We appreciate you. We appreciate our sponsor, Remy Martin. Thank you. Team up with excellence, y'all. Get some Remy Martin. A little Remy, whether you want to do ginger ale or ginger beer, your call. You know, rock that out. Have a good time Super Bowl Sunday with some Remy Martin in the building. I know that's my plan. Actually, tell you the truth, I don't have a plan of where I'm watching the game yet. I used to throw Super Bowl parties, and then that got a little. The place that I'm in now is it's not conducive to it. Like I'm in a townhouse. It's got a bunch of stairs and stuff, and I don't know. I don't think that it's conducive for a party. So I am looking for a place to watch the Super Bowl, and we're doing Super Bowl content all week long here on House of L. I wanted to talk about Roger Goodell for a little bit. Let me take you back. Let me tell you story time with Santa Laurence because of the beard. I want to go back to 2010, December of 2010. I am still a beat reporter for the Score. I'm covering the Bears. I'm in Minnesota. And it was, I didn't realize that Minneapolis was really bad at snowstorms. I thought they were like Chicago. I thought they had been through it, they understood how to handle it. And I was seeing some streets and highways. You talk about white knuckle driving. I got the rental car and it was slipping and sliding all over the place. It was horrible. This was after the Metrodome had collapsed. So the Vikings were playing their games at the University of Minnesota. It was not too far from where we were all staying. Back in those days, the team would put you in the team hotel. Now you had to pay for it, but they would get a rate. And so everyone that was on the beat had the opportunity to stay at the team hotel. It's amazing some of the things you see at a team hotel. I haven't done that podcast yet. I'm saving that for my book. I don't know if I'm writing a book, but you get a real understanding of how a football team functions and all of the things that go along with money, power, and fame. But that's neither here nor there. Well, I'll save that for a different episode. I like to get a workout in, and since I had been traveling, I didn't get a chance to get my workout in the morning. Like that's what I like to do in the morning. So I hit the gym in the afternoon. It's probably, I don't know, 1 o'clock or so. And I'm on the treadmill. And I'm on the treadmill next to Jerry Angelo, who was the Bears general manager at the time. I get a text message that Brett Favre is going to play. He's going to start for the Vikings. Back then, there were 4 different designations. They've now made it 3. You were either in, or you were questionable, or you were doubtful, or you were out. And basically, it's 25% for doubtful, 50 for questionable, then probable, right? It's improbable and in and out. So Favre was listed as out all week. Like the Vikings, for the most part, didn't play around with it at all. They just said he was out. I think Joe Webb was supposed to start, if I'm remembering correctly. And then the day of the game, Favre decided that he was going to play. Not only was he going to suit up, he was going to start. This is an extremely unfair thing that happened. For a team to prepare, like you're not supposed to mess around with the injury report, especially to that degree. A guy questionable starting, yeah. A guy who's doubtful and starts, the league back then would, they didn't like that. It messes with the lines, like it messes, not that they cared about gambling back then, right? They didn't care about gambling back in 2010. But they didn't like that. So I'm on the treadmill next to Jerry Angelo, and I'm like, hey man, Favre's gonna play. And he's like, no, he's not, he's out. I'm like, no, he's playing. And so Angelo hops off the treadmill and he's pissed. I finished my workout. I only had a couple more minutes left to go. I get on an elevator. There's a Bears coach on the elevator, and I said, Favre's playing. And this coach was like, no, the bleep, he's not playing. And I was like, oh, yeah, he is. So then that coach runs out of there. And then the Bears have to get ready to face Brett Favre when they weren't ready to face him. Strangely enough, we get over to the University of Minnesota. Roger Goodell, he would occasionally like just kind of pop in and do press conferences. So he did a press conference before the game in Minnesota. And so I asked him about this because it seemed like a really unfair advantage that the Vikings had been given. And Favre was being allowed to do something that usually people don't do. So I asked about it, and Roger kind of gave me a BS answer about it. So I waited, and then I went back to ask again about the unfair advantage because I had heard from people with the Bears that they thought it was unfair. So I thought I was doing the right thing by covering the story. Then I got a talking to. I got a talking to after the press conference was over. It really bugged me too because the people that were on the beat, they kind of laughed when I asked the follow-up question, even though they all ran the quote and they all had the same question. And one of them was like, I'm glad that you asked the question. And that bothered me. There's a lot of stuff about that stuff that really bothered me when I covered the team. And I get nervous laughter as a thing, but we all felt like this was not fair to the Bears. And then, it was the chuckle hut when I asked the question about it. Any hoozle. I got a talking to. I got the, hey, who are you? Where are you from? Who do you work for? I think it was Michael Signora. I think Michael's still with the league. He's one of the top guys at the league that kind of is like, oh, we wanted to give you some clarity on this. We know that you were interested. We wanted to give you some clarity on it. So I took that for the warning that it was. Then in the game, Corey Wooten got Brett Favre, and that was basically the end of Brett Favre. But it was still unfair. I bring that up because Roger Goodell spoke down in New Orleans, and I go back and forth on how I feel about Roger. I know people who know him pretty well, and they have talked to me about how the public perception that Roger tries to exude isn't necessarily how Roger gets down in the offices of 345 Park Avenue. And I was surprised to hear from people that I trust that Roger has been someone who does push back. He just doesn't really do it publicly. And it was interesting to me that what we saw on Monday night was him pushing back on DEI a little bit, saying that it's good for the NFL as a whole, and they're going to continue with a lot of their DEI programming. I do think that people forget that. I think that now it's kind of become synonymous with Black people, and maybe it's become synonymous with women, but it does help other marginalized communities. And I think that some of the rollback on it has it had unintended consequences. Like veterans are part of a lot of DEI programming. People with disabilities are part of a lot of DEI programming. And now where we're seeing so many neurodivergent people benefit from DEI, and seeing it roll back is disappointing, but I'm not going to get ultra political here. I'll just say that with the power of the NFL behind you, if you're Roger Goodell, whom shall you fear? There's no one who could turn that faucet off. I know that there are people who think that they're not going to boycott the Super Bowl. They're going to watch. And even if they were to boycott the Super Bowl, it wouldn't matter. The NFL has become too big to fail in that regard. They're $22 billion. That's what they're bringing in. It is what everyone wants to watch. There'll be 165 million people that tune into the Super Bowl this year. But I go back and forth with Roger because I don't think that even at this point in his career, he's figured out how to walk the line on trying to get stuff done behind the scenes. But I also think that some of the stuff that he does is a little shady. Like, you're a champion of DEI, right? But when you have been asked multiple times about what's going on at NFL Network, you kind of silence one of the most important reporters that you have there, to the point where that person ends up leaving and then suing the NFL. And then Jim Trotter ended up settling with the NFL. And it probably would have cost them less to answer his questions and try to make change in the NFL Network newsroom than it did for them to settle with him. It's stuff like that where I'm like, ugh. Or, for example, getting into the Roger Goodell press conference on Monday night. It's invite only now. It used to be that anyone could go be in there. If you were credentialed, you were credentialed. And now they've kind of created this extra tier so that Roger can do and say whatever. Or I think that most of the people who ask questions Jared Payton was one of the people that asked questions yesterday, are well-intended. Andrew Marchand was in there. Like that guy's strong. I just think that it's always a bad thing when there is limited access, and the access isn't limited because of size of room. It's limited because you know that there are some people who might have to ask you some hard questions. This is where, even though I had the experience with Roger and the Favre thing, I will defend him. People asking on whether or not the Chiefs get preferential treatment, I find that silly. And as someone who lived through the Jordan era, usually superstars get calls. Patrick Mahomes gets calls. I don't think that it's the league putting out mandates. I think that you're right if you're going, hey, they do get preferential treatment, but it's not because of conspiracy. I think that it's because of some implicit bias. I think that even officials can be starstruck occasionally. But I don't think that they're trying to let the Chiefs win over any of the other teams. Now, maybe years from now, I'll be proven wrong. And you'll hold up this podcast and I'll be retired and living in Montreal. And you'll be like, hey, Laurence, what about this thing that you said back in 2025? It's 2028 now. Where you at? I'm like, I'm in Montreal, chilling, not doing any of this stuff. But I appreciate, well, I'll probably still be doing the podcast. But you know what I mean. I thought that was kind of off the wall. But, and this is what I mean, like I go back and forth with Roger. Then you have the Tom Brady stuff. And him being like, oh, well, Tom Brady, he checks in with me regularly. And there's no conflict of interest there. The conflict of interest with Tom Brady being an owner of the Raiders and being the number one analyst in the NFL for Fox, calling the Super Bowl on Sunday, the bias is just, it is dripping with bias. It is dripping with conflict. I don't know how. I'm not here telling you that Tom Brady is using his position to make the Raiders a better franchise, but I do know that he will do anything to win. And it's one of the things that we love about Tom Brady is he will do anything to win. And knowing that, don't you have to try even harder to be transparent about what his relationship is? And so that it is as fair as it can be for anyone who's looking for a coach or a free agent. It's a whole different ball game if there's a guy who's going to be a free agent and he's on the field before the game and he's talking to Tom Brady. And not talking to Tom Brady, the broadcaster, the guy that is going to help make some change in Las Vegas and like, oh, we're really building it up and you should make sure that you come see it. It's not hard for folks to see that conflict. You know what I'm saying? And I don't think that Roger pushes back. I don't think that his answer yesterday enough to what are, I think, legitimate concerns in that regard. So, this scale with him, he's clearly successful. Like he has grown the NFL by leaps and bounds. And my interaction aside, like he was polite, he was not happy with my question, but he was polite. I think he's a net positive for me. I think just from what other people who know him tell me about him, the people that I trust, I think he's a net positive, but I don't know. I don't know how you feel. You can let me know. Let me know in the comments how you feel. I think there's no questioning his success. I think that as consumers, we're so much smarter about the role of commissioner. When you're younger, you're like, oh, the commissioner is the one in charge. Kinda. And then you find out about that next level of being in charge and that he reports to the owners and he kind of does the owner's bidding. And we would like to have someone in that role, whether it's football, baseball, basketball, especially hockey. We want someone in that role that is there to protect the sport and not protect the league or the brand, but protect the sport. And it's too often that it feels like the brand is being protected while the game and the sport is not. But let me know what you think. Maybe you feel differently about Roger. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple, we appreciate you. Thank you. Come on over to the YouTube page. We like having you there. Thanks to Remy Martin. We love Remy Martin being our sponsor of the House of L podcast. And thanks for continued support of it. It continues to grow. We'll keep putting out content. I'm going to start breaking down the game tomorrow. So we're going to let you know. I'm going to give you reasons why each team's going to win. And you can choose which one makes the most sense to you. And I heard Zach Zaidman's going to be on House of L soon. We're going to trade Super Bowl stories. It's going to be fun. I will talk to you next time. Peace.